Much has been written about Wyatt Earp in his early years as a lawman in Kansas and later in Tombstone, Arizona. The years in Tombstone are without a doubt when Wyatt developed his larger-than-life persona and reputation. That period of his life is when he met his common-law wife, Josephine Marcus, who would be with him until his death 44 years later. The years leading up to Tombstone and the Tombstone portion of his life are well documented by the written word as well as Hollywood films. The shootout at the OK Corral and the vendetta that followed are stories for which legends are made, and I would be hard-pressed to add much to that narrative. The period after Tombstone for Wyatt and Sadie, though not as legendary and full of excitement as those early years, was quite eventful and interesting in its own right. In this video, I will delve into that period. Josephine Sarah Sadie Marcus was born in New York City in 1861 and at age 7 moved to San Francisco with her family. A lot of the documentation of her early life is sketchy and conflicting. It is safe to say that she was a free spirit and was always looking for adventure. At an early age, she made her way to Tombstone, met Wyatt, and they began a relationship that lasted for 46 years until Wyatt's death. She preferred to go by the name Josephine, but Wyatt called her Sadie, which was an irritant to her. After the gunfight at the OK Corral and the vendetta against the outlaw group that killed his brother, Wyatt and Josephine left Tombstone and made their way to San Francisco with stops in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Trinidad, Colorado, and Gunnison, Colorado. In 1883, the couple traveled to Silverton, Colorado, and a year later to Eagle City, Idaho. Both were gold and silver boom towns, and throughout his life, Wyatt had a habit of seeking the easy money in areas known for striking silver and gold. Wyatt once said he liked being in boom towns so he could, quote, mind the miners, end quote. He knew there was money to be made in saloons, providing miners with both booze and prostitutes. When the gold and silver died out in Idaho in 1887, Wyatt and Sadie, as he liked to call Josephine, headed for San Diego, a different kind of boom town. The railroad was about to arrive in San Diego, and the population grew to 40,000. In San Diego, Earp speculated in real estate and opened 4 saloons and gambling halls. At the height of the boom, he made up to $1,000 a night in profit. The boom in San Diego ended, and the population went from 40,000 to 16,000. Wyatt and Josie left San Diego and headed back to San Francisco, where they stayed from 1891 through 1897. Earp lost his properties in San Diego as he was unable to pay the real estate taxes. Josephine would later claim that the couple married in 1892 during this 5-year stint in San Francisco, but there is no record to substantiate that claim. She was always trying to portray themselves as a fine, upstanding couple, and would twist the truth in order to convey that image that she so craved. The two had a strained relationship as he had affairs and she developed a serious gambling problem that would last a lifetime. Wyatt developed a keen interest in the sport of boxing and would referee fights in San Francisco. In 1896, he was tabbed to be the referee in a heavyweight world championship bout between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey. During the fight, Sharkey suddenly fell to the canvas and started rolling around, claiming a below-the-belt punch. Nobody saw the phantom punch other than Earp. He called a foul on Fitzsimmons and awarded the bout to Sharkey. It is strongly speculated that he had a wager on Sharkey. The national press lampooned him for the decision. Years later, the doctor who examined Sharkey after the fight and confirmed that there had indeed been a below-the-belt punch recanted his story and claimed that he was paid $1,000 for his false testimony. In 1897, Wyatt heard about the gold rush in the Klondike in Alaska. As usual, the allure of gold and miners intrigued him, and he packed up and headed to Alaska. Josephine wasn't too thrilled about the idea of Alaska, but as always continued on with Earp's wishes. Instead of ending up in Dawson, Alaska as originally planned, the Earps went to Nome, where Wyatt and a partner built the Dexter Saloon, the first two-story building in Nome. The second story had 12 rooms to be used by the sporting ladies in the employ of the owners of the Dexter. For reasons unknown, the two nomads left for Seattle in 1900, where, as usual, Wyatt tried his hand in the saloon and gambling business. For many reasons, that venture in Seattle was not successful, and in 1901 they headed back to Nome as he still held an ownership stake in the Dexter. In 1901 he sold their interest in the Dexter and headed to Los Angeles with $80,000 in tow, a large fortune for the times. In 1905 he headed to another boomtown in Tonopah, Nevada, where he owned the mildly successful Northern Saloon. In 1906, gold and silver was discovered in Vidal, California, and Josephine and Wyatt were on the move again. During the period 1885 to 1929, Wyatt and Josie maintained rental residences in Los Angeles. The only residence they ever owned was in Vidal, and they began a life of shuttling between Los Angeles and Vidal. They were moderately successful in their mining interests in Vidal and made enough to live off of. Later in life, Wyatt attempted to write his life story with the help of a friend, John Flood. The project seemed doomed from the get-go, as Josephine interfered with the manuscript, always trying to make Wyatt look like a saint. In addition, Flood was a terrible writer, and they never got the traction needed to turn it into a marketable book or movie. Wyatt died on January 13, 1929, at age 80, and is buried in the Hills of Eternity Cemetery in Colma, California. Josephine died in 1944 at age 84 and is buried alongside Wyatt. If you enjoyed this video, give a thumbs up, make a comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching.